Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the East Lyme Board of Finance regular meeting. Today is Wednesday, October 13th. The time is 7 p.m. If you would please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda we have delegations. This is an opportunity for anybody to address the board with any questions or concerns about something that's on the agenda this evening. Yes, Mr. Mingo. Would you mind putting that down for me? Name and address, please.
397 Boston Post Road. I come here in support of the money to redo Well 5. It's extremely important that Well 5 is going to be, regardless of who pays for it, we're either going to bond it, and the ratepayers are going to have to pay it, or we can use the money from the fund. There's no, it's not a question of it's not going to get done. It has to get done. It's one of our most productive wells. It's extremely important. We need the water. It's the most pristine water that we have in all our wells. So one way or the other, it's going to get done. Whether the ratepayers pay it or we use the fund, which would, we won't be forced to raise the water rates.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wishing to address the Board of Finance this evening? Yes, Mr. Cunningham.
Good evening. My name's Dan Cunningham. I live at 4 Smith Street. In the interest of full disclosure, I am a member of the Board of Selectmen in the town of East Lyme. I come here tonight to support the 4 appropriations from the assistance, the resource American assist. Let me get it right. Human resource from contingency. So I think that the water and sewer, the well number 5, is very important. It's consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development. Chapter 13 talks about investment in infrastructure, resiliency, and redoing that well will be consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development. Also, other bad news today, supply chain issues. It takes a special kind of pipe to sink that well, and it could become less available if we wait. And I think it'll just, there's no good reason to put off doing this project. It'll cost more, meets the POCD, and it's good timing. I think we heard before, or at least I did, that this time of year is the best time to sink a well. The further we wait towards the spring, the less opportune timing is. So I don't see any good reason to delay this, and I would hope that the board would consider those issues in making their decision tonight. The other thing, Manic Main Street, the charrette money, they did such a wonderful job with that money last time, and look at all the wonderful things we have that really can be related back to that charrette in 1997. So I hope that that'll be supported by the board. And then Karen Share, it's holiday season coming up. They need another freezer. There's great demand of more than we've had in the past, I believe. These are not a lot of good times for many people. So I'm hopeful that they'll have that extra freezer to store other, turkeys and things that they can use to help people in need for the holidays. So I think that's all real important stuff. So that's my comments, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank
Anybody else in the audience wishing to address the Board of Finance this evening? Anybody else? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of September 8th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the Esign Board of Finance regular meeting minutes of Wednesday, September 8th, 2021.
Thank you, Ann Santoro. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Rich. Is there any discussion? Comments, questions, discussion on the minutes? Hearing no comments, questions, or concerns, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please do so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
And Chiquillos abstains. 501. Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move on to the reports this evening. First, we'll hear from the Deputy First Selectman, Mr. Kevin Siri.
Thank you, Camille. Just covering some positive things too that have just happened. A few weeks ago, the Oyster Festival took place that I think everybody in town was at some point in time. It was extremely enjoyable. They raised over $20,000 for the Miracle League in that event. It was really, really well done. Week prior to that, they had the American Suicide Prevention Foundation, in cooperation with the Brian Daigle Foundation, had the Walk Out of the Darkness. Their goal was to raise $25,000. They raised about $55,000. Wow. It was the highest amount raised in any walk in the state to that point. Hartford's was a little later, and they figured Hartford was probably because of the number of people would eclipse us. I don't know if that happened or not. This past Monday, they had a Indigenous People Day at McCook's. It was quite interesting. It was a nice presentation on the Niantic Indian history, so it was quite captivating to hear about, how they settled here and how they were unsettled here in the not nicest way. So it was a very nice event. The Vintage Market was Saturday. There's a couple of people from Main Street here. I think it was extremely successful for vendors and organizing, and a shout out to Main Street people for all they did to make that happen. This Saturday is the Boardwalk 5K. I'll be cheering it on. I'm not running it, or probably walking it either. So anyway, and that's it. Coming up in the Board of Selectmen meeting next week, we're hoping to have a presentation from the Land Trust regarding the Hathaway property. Several of us attended a meeting on that not too long ago, so we're hoping to have that presentation, and then decide to move that possibly forward for further consideration. So that's pretty much it. Any questions?
Any questions for the Deputy First Selectman? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from the Director of Finance. Anna, do you want one of these mics for the table in case we have follow-up questions?
You know what? They have the other handheld mics. I can grab one after I finish.
Okay.
But this is just as easy for me up here.
Okay.
So in your green folders this evening, there were a few items, one of them being an internal service fund analysis, and the other two items are additional backup for items that are on the agenda this evening. So one of the audit recommendations was for us to come up with a plan to deal with the internal service fund deficit. And so last month, the Board of Education Finance Director and I met to discuss this, and what I've provided you with is what we've come up with a plan to eliminate the deficit. And so in the upper left-hand corner, it itemizes the amount that's due to other funds, which is the general fund, what the cash balance currently in the fund is, and there's another small balance due from water operations. So the amount to settle the deficit is just under $709,000. So we divided out dealing with the deficit, but between the town and the Board of Education. The Board of Ed, and we did it based on the number of contracts within the group, meaning the number of Board of Ed employees that were in the health insurance plan, and the same on the town side. So it's a 23% split, with the Board of Ed responsible for $546,000 and the town responsible for $162,000. So you see over on the right, there's a 4-year payoff and there's a 3-year payoff. So you'll notice that in the 4-year payoff, it includes funding from this fiscal year. So in the current fiscal year, what we discussed is if either the town or the board has some remaining funds in our budget at the end of this fiscal year, we will use those funds to deal with the deficit. So with that being said, it would be a lower amount that we would have to actually include funding in our subsequent year's budgets. So that's kind of what we've come up with, and we'll see how it goes. So when we get to budget time, we're going to have to, by the time we get to April, each of us should have an idea, and we would be able to adjust down the proposed budget for next fiscal year based on this. So this is kind of what we came up with to deal with the issue. Mariana was going to be presenting it on the Board of Education side as well. Sent out with your packages was an analysis of the CNRE fund. And so at the request of Chairman Alberti, I did add an additional column to give the status of all the various items that we have appropriated within the fund. And you'll note there are several that say complete. So there are some with 0 balances, and then there are other projects that have remaining balances. So any of the projects that have remaining balances, we would come back to the boards and ask to reallocate the funds back to their original source. Most of them, I believe, would be reserved to fund future projects. I will point out on page 3, at the very bottom, the item for $25,100, that was actually a Board of Education appropriation, energy saving initiatives at the high school. They did not need to use this source of funding, and so those funds will go back to the Lily B. Haynes reserve that they had.
Which line item was that?
It's on page 3 at the very bottom, the last highlighted column for $25,100.
Okay. So that is something that this board may want to consider requesting the Board of Education, if possibly we could allocate some of that into this turf field replacement fund that we've been trying to beef up, so to speak. So not anything tonight, but something in the future that could be a possible ask for that amount.
I will note, when I highlighted on the first page, I included the Fire Marshal Knox box account, which is the $8,370. That shouldn't be highlighted.
That was just approved.
Yes. And then I will also mention that, if you recall, there was a previous request to transfer from the general fund into the CNRE fund the remaining portion of the FEMA funds that had been allocated to the contingency account. So they have been added to the townwide projects account, which is on page 3. And if you look in the balance column, it's the account with the balance of $257,777. So those are kind of the highlights that I wanted to give you on the report. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for the Finance Director? Any questions on the reports? I'll ask a question, Anna. How was the How was the allocation determined between the Board of Ed and the town on the internal service fund?
So it was the number of contracts on each side within the plan. So in other words, the number of employees that take the benefits.
So I need a refresher on this. This internal service fund analysis, these were for the, when we were self-insured? And the
That's correct.
And the liabilities that we incurred under that plan.
That's correct, yes.
And this is what the auditor suggested, that you have a plan to come up with to address that
The deficit, yes.
Very good, nice work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the finance director?
I have one.
Yes, John?
Anna, on Town of East Lyme schedule of contingency, the beginning balance is 171,910,
Yes.
and when you go to the expenditure year analysis, that line item says 226,208. Am I missing something here, or?
So the reason for the difference is we carried over the remaining contingency balance from the 6/30/21 fiscal year. So that amount was added to the original budget of the 171.
Okay,
I think it was about 61,000, if I remember correctly.
yes. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
So I'll just point out, if you look at the general fund highlight summary, we did receive in September the pilot tiered reimbursement grant came in, the $1,031,000. Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you. Moving on to new business, before we get started, I'd like to address a situation this evening that came up in the past week, and I would like this board to consider adding an agenda item onto our agenda this evening. This deals with a certain appropriation request that went through the approval cycle in the past several weeks. It started with Save the River, Save the Hills, with an appropriation request. Then it went on to the Board of Finance, who vetted the appropriation request, passed it, came to the Board of Finance, it got passed, and then it went to a town meeting last Wednesday, and it got passed. So this week I discovered an actual problem with that ARP appropriation request. And to make this as concise and understandable as possible, what happened was Save the River, Save the Hills came to us asking for help, financial assistance in acquiring a pump-out boat. 75% of the amount of that boat was coming from a federal grant program called the Clean Vessel Act. Okay, 75%. In order to receive the funds for that vessel, they needed a match of 25% from the town of East Lyme and Waterford. So the 25% ended up costing $25,000. So both towns went through the approval process. We each approved $12,500 for our share to contribute to that. The problem is ARP funds, American Rescue Plan funds, are federal dollars. And the bottom line is you can't match a federal grant with federal dollars. So I would like to have this board consider sending this appropriation request back to the Board of Selectmen with a recommendation that we not pay for this out of ARP funds, but rather we take it from contingency, which still has a healthy balance. So first, do I have a motion to add this agenda item onto our agenda tonight?
I'll move to add the agenda item on.
That's fine. Is there a second? Thanks, Peter. Okay, so I explained the problem. I think we can add that agenda item on here. It looks like you're wanting to say something.
Yeah, I would,
Mr. Siri.
is it? Okay. Okay, it's on. Yeah, if you found something that's in question, I think definitely you should come back to us to review too. Anna, have we dispersed that check yet at all for that? Okay, good. So obviously put a hold on it, come back to us, and obviously we'll vet it and move forward and get back to you. And thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I had a nice conversation with Kate at Deep
Do
today.
you have a contact for her too at all?
Yes, I do have a contact name and number that
Okay.
you can get in touch with her. And she was kind enough to send me the requirements for the ARP funding, the allowable use, which, you know, we went through the document together and we can clearly see that this was not an allowable expenditure. So we definitely need to take care of it. I'm glad the check has not been written. We can send it back with our recommendation, of course, to the Board of Selectmen that you pull that from contingency.
Can I raise an issue here?
No, you cannot. No.
You need to vote on this.
Yes, of course we do, sir,
You
but
didn't
you
vote.
cannot speak at this moment in time. Of course, we are going to vote on this. So, that would be my suggestion. Of course, it's up to the Board of Selectmen to decide how to handle that. So we have a motion, we have a second, and I want to know if there's any further discussion to add, first of all, the motion to the agenda. If there's none, we'll take a motion, I'll take a vote. All those in favor of adding this agenda item onto this evening's agenda, please do so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We have one opposed from Ann Santoro. Abstain? Motion carries 501. Now, the second part of this evening's task would be to make a motion to send this appropriation request back to the Board of Selectmen with a recommendation for them to reconsider the source of funding not being from ARP, but rather from the town's contingency fund. Would somebody like to make that motion? You can just say so moved.
So moved.
Thank you, Rich. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Ann Chichello. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I guess, I think it's really imperative that everything, each and every single appropriation that's supposed to go through the ARP funds get vetted. I know there are certain parameters, but I think it's really important that it gets vetted and it goes through, you know, town council or anybody else. It looks like it got by the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the town. And that's not something that we want, because I'm concerned about what would happen, you know, if we get audited or anything like that. So I think it's kind of, I feel that this kind of got by all of us.
All right,
I'd like to prevent this from happening again, and I just want to make sure that in the future, you know, everything gets vetted properly.
Yeah, I think Waterford has already approved this long before we did too, so we'll make sure they get notified as well.
They're notified. I reached out to Save the River, Save the Hills, and they'll make the appropriate contact
Okay.
with Waterford.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I'll abstain. One abstain. Motion carries 501. Okay, thank you. With that, we can move on to new business, which is a special appropriation up to $10,000 for a part-time assistance for human resources. Who will be speaking this evening on that appropriation request?
I can start, and then I'll have Tracy make a comment.
Sure.
we hired Tracy a few months ago, and it's been a great find for us right now because she's been able to find a lot of concerns. And I've talked to her about it, and very supportive of the fact that we need to address this as quickly as possible. And she's given us a task list and how she wants to approach it. So Tracy, I think the best thing to do is let her go up and talk to it because she's the HR expert.
Full name and title, Tracy, for the record, please.
Sure. Good evening, my name is Tracy Santos, and my title is Human Resources Coordinator.
Welcome.
Thank you. So, as Kevin mentioned, and we discussed last week at the Board of Selectmen meeting, I've been here a few months, and in that time, I have found some things that need to be addressed in the Human Resources Office. One, to be in compliance, and two, to work more efficiently and effectively. So in your packet, I gave you a letter about that. I don't know if you want me to read it or if you've already read it. And then on the back is what I shared last week at the Board of Selectmen meeting on how I plan to use this part-time help, and I put it into two phases. Phase one is pretty much to get the office in order, to get the items that need to be in compliance. And then the second phase would be to help with the day-to-day operations, secretarial and administrative support, assist with all personnel files and information, workers' compensation, help with recruiting and posting positions, because we've had quite a few lately, and just other duties as assigned. That is the reason for my request.
Okay, thank you. And Karen, do you have a copy of the letter that she referenced? Very good. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Santos regarding this request? Yes, Rich?
Yes, it's mentioned as a temporary position. What kind of period of time are you talking about?
Yes, it would be great if it would become permanent, but I'm looking at least 6 months to get these initial things done.
Okay, and then for that 6 months, how many hours a week are you anticipating?
Probably like 15 hours a week.
Okay. And since you opened the door on hoping that it would become a permanent position, some of the duties as described in Phase 2 tend to lead one to believe that it would become a permanent position. Are you able to, once things are cleaned up, be able to assume these duties yourself if this is not to become a permanent position?
Well, I would do my best to do that. There's an awful lot of work to be done in the Human Resources Office. I know you've been, I want to say, getting by with a part-time person, but I don't think really it has been very effective. I'm sure they worked very hard with the time they were allotted, but there's much to be done in a Human Resources office. There's many employees to accommodate, handle, whatever, assist. So I'm hoping to do the best I can, but I can't guarantee that I can do it myself. It's extremely busy. We do need automation in the Human Resources Department as well. A lot of things are being done manually, which is really not very efficient, effective, and kind of puts us out there for liability.
Okay. And does our IT staff, is our IT staff able to provide some assistance towards that end of automation?
Well, since I arrived, we've been looking at automated systems, ones that I have used in my previous organizations and some that I've heard about. I'm sure she will be able to help us. She was included in one of the presentations of one of the programs that we looked at.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Ms. Santos?
Hi.
Yes, hi. It's Tracy. Yeah, it sounds like you definitely need some help for the next few months to clean up files and so forth. So for this person and for this $10,000, what's the skill set that you're looking for at this point? I mean, assuming that maybe there's a permanent, a position down the pike, but right now, what are you what's your goal with this person?
Yes. I would like them to have strong administrative skills, very organized, good time management, and above all, have a great deal be able to deal with confidentiality.
Okay. So would you expect them to have have had some HR experience in their resume, or more of more administrative, clerical, or how do you?
It would be beneficial if they had some HR background, but I think, I want to say more importantly, but the organization and the administration and confidentiality are really important.
Right. Okay. And I assume you would, if they didn't have the HR background, that this is part of their on-the-job learning, so to speak, if they, assuming
Absolutely.
they pass whatever vetting that needs to happen so that they can, handle confidential personnel files. Okay. All right, very
Absolutely.
good. Thanks.
Hi.
Hi, Ian Chikello. I just wanted to know, you started this job how long ago?
I started on July 12th.
July 12th. And who has shown you the ropes and kind of shown you what to do? Who's been kind of your mentor? since you
Well,
did this
fortunately,
job?
we have a great team here. I have a lot of HR experience. I worked several years at a school system, and I worked at the City of Groton for a few years, and I also worked at a college. So I have lots of experience. But as far as how things are done here and procedures here, just so I can get an understanding, Anna has been extremely helpful. Joe Brava has been extremely helpful. Renee Fecto, and a bunch of others. And anytime I need help, I ask, as simple as using the mail machine to send out mail. So we have a great team here.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, just one of the things too, she also deals with it for like when the Board of Ed people have retire and someone's retired. Tracy has to work through those numbers too, even though they have their own HR department too. And I mentioned at the Board of Selectmen meeting last week that there's no town our size that has less than 2 full-time people in there. And this week, she's trying to do the files now, then she gets a call from someone who's interested in retirement numbers. That means something has to be delayed. So, I think, sometimes you always try to save money and so forth like that, but we're talking about a critical area that's growing in times and so forth like that. HR is becoming an integral part. If there's an employee complaint, that's where it should go. So Tracy has brought us up to where we are been made aware of what we need to do. So I'm fully supportive of this, and something for the next budget cycle. I think we have to take a good hard look at what's best for the interest of the town as a whole, because being out of compliance in some of these confidentiality issues can be quite serious. So, and she's been a great asset since she's got here. So thank you.
Thank you.
John, did you want to say
No, I
something?
was just great.
Oh. Okay, well, so I'm going to speak from a financial perspective this evening, and what I've seen is that we've gone from 20 hours a week, which was woefully inadequate, up to 30 hours, up to 32, and now with the recent posting, now this is a full-time position, 37 and a half hours. So I did meet with Tracy to get an understanding of the exact workload and the challenges in that office, and they are numerous. And I feel like we have had 20 years of dysfunction in HR. I'm very pleased that you've joined our town, and I appreciate your background and your skills. And I understand your challenges in terms of coming into compliance with some of the things that we've talked about, the I-9s and just the security of the personnel files and things of that nature. But you've been on the job for a couple of months, and I know that when you take a new job, there's always a steep learning curve. And I'm not talking about the skills that you bring to the table with HR. I'm talking about learning curve in terms of the organization and the people and things that you might have had land on your desk that you weren't anticipating. I'm sure there's a little bit of that. So I would suggest, and I see that you've made great progress already, and I would suggest holding off. This is a problem that we've had for years. It's not going to be fixed in a short amount of time. I think you're doing great, and I think that we should continue as we are for another month or two and reassess. progress at that point. That would be my position on this particular appropriation request. Any other comments or concerns?
I have a comment. I appreciate your thought process on this. However, I personally think your employees are suffering because of this. So I just want to make that point. They're
Can you
not
give
getting.
a specific example?
Sure, I can. They're not getting the service they need. I can only be spread so thin. People are calling all the time, asking, requesting things, and there are only so many hours in the day, and I don't get to them in as timely as they would like or I would like. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to make that
Yeah.
comment.
Can you give a specific example of a service that's not being provided on a timely basis?
Sure, like Kevin mentioned, people are asking for retirement estimates, trying to post jobs quickly because we've had some turnover. People have insurance questions and issues, whether it be for themselves or their dependents, COBRA issues, stuff like that. They're getting addressed, but it's taking me much longer than it should.
Okay, well, that would certainly be a priority over cleaning up antiquated filing systems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a matter of prioritization as well. Okay.
I guess I think part of this, starting a new job, it takes 6 months to a year to ramp up, to learn how to do the stamps, where to do this, how to do that. So I think that's part of it. So I guess I would want to see a few more months, 6 months, a year under her belt, then just to reevaluate it. Because, I've started jobs and it takes a long time to ramp up. Even though you want to and even though you're skilled, you have to learn it. It's so that's my take on this.
Rich.
Oh, go ahead.
You go, Ann.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
wait.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I don't know, it just seems to me that Tracy's making a specific point that she made at the Board of Selectmen meeting and is making again that there are files that need to be addressed. There's been a filing system that hasn't necessarily met appropriate standards. So thinking in those terms, I have a hard time, expecting her as the HR manager to handle the very substantive, meaty issues and questions that come to you, and then at the same time expect to clean up if it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years of filing issues that we may face. So when I'm looking in our packets, we first got the backside of the memo, not the front side, but it was, but then we just got the front side as well. So, but just looking at, the way you've divided this work, it seems to me some of it is definitely clerical administrative, that may just be that someone has to bring the files up to standards and in compliance. So for me, I would think that spending $10,000 is a good use of money to get us out of a little hole we're in, and then you can focus on some of the more the daily issues, the complex issues, when people have questions and issues concerning their retirements, et cetera, or new hires. So, and we are definitely in that phase, the last couple of years in this town, of people retiring, new hires. So we have a confluence of things going on.
Right.
So I feel as though a 3 to 6 month cleanup, is certainly warranted by what you've expressed at that meeting and from your memos here. So.
And just to add to your point, when we talk about cleanup, it's not just cleaning it up to look nice, it's to be in compliance. The I-9 forms are not compliant. I went through all of them, disposed of what I could, but there are many that are still active, that we have to keep on file, and they're not completed properly, and we could be in trouble for that. So that's one of my main concerns, and I'm trying to do it a little bit each day, but it's just, there's so much to be done. So.
Okay. Anybody else? Rich?
Yeah, a couple questions. The first one is, in terms of being out of compliance, are we at risk of any legal or financial actions?
For the I-9s, I believe so.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what the cost would be. I've never had this issue happen, but if we're audited, yes, we could be fined. That's
Oh, okay.
that's a federal.
Okay. And then within our current HR department, do we have any self-service, either applications or ability by employees? A lot of places that I've worked, the HR department was kind of a last resort because usually they were too busy doing all the compliance things. So for the insurance or for the retirement, a lot of times there were automated systems that you could do self-service. Do we have anything in place, and do you have plans to put those in place so that we could just do a cleanup and not necessarily need to increase headcount?
Yes. So no, we don't have that in place at this time, but yes, that is something that we're looking at. Like I said earlier, we did look at some computer systems that offer recruiting, onboarding, and things like that. Attendance, we do attendance on a spreadsheet right now with 3-part carbon forms. So with the, that's just one of the many. Anyway, yes, so hopefully with the automation, we can do recruiting online, which will move into onboarding online, which would reduce a lot of paper, time, and it would be much more efficient.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? John?
In your job now, how many different aspects do you have to deal with?
A lot. So there's, health insurance, workers' compensation, there's recruiting, onboarding, personnel issues, just to name a few.
Okay, if, say this is not approved tonight, and you're the only one doing all this work, basically, how long would your job load build up that you have to deal with?
I'm sorry, ask that again. How long what?
How long would it take for your workload to be out of control where you couldn't catch up,
It already is.
Huh?
It already is.
I know.
It was like that when
If
I-
you don't have any help on this,
It's
things
just
are
gonna get worse.
worse.
Exactly.
So if we
It's
delay
just-
this another month, another 6 months, you're gonna be really behind the 8 ball. You've gotta have so much work to do, you might have to hire 2 people.
Perhaps.
Is possible?
Sure. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I can't see delaying this. I think you need to help now. $10,000 isn't really a lot of money, in the grand scheme of things. So I think we have to approve this so you can get started to get that, all these items that you have to deal with every day down to an acceptable level.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
John. Any other further discussion?
One more question.
Yes, Rich.
In terms of the compliance issues, which I view as probably the most critical because it puts the town at risk.
Right.
And this isn't to demean town employees that they sit lower on the totem pole, but the compliance issues are where we really face a risk situation. What percentage of your time is spent on dealing with compliance issues at this point?
Well, in the beginning, when I first started, I tried to put aside at least an hour a day to work on those things. Unfortunately, within the last 3 weeks, I haven't been able to address them at all.
Okay, and what's come up to take the place of dealing with compliance issues?
Let's see. Well, the last week I was working on recruiting. We lost 2 employees, so I was working on that. Again, people asking for retirement estimates. I don't know, it all seems like a blur, but I'm very busy all day long, every day.
No, I believe that.
It's like I'm just jumping from one thing to another, just kind of like trying to keep up with everything. And I'm really organized, I really am, and I've been doing this for a long time, so
Right.
I know I can do a good job. I just need the resources to make it happen.
Okay.
All set, Rich?
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Go ahead. I'll move to approve a special appropriation in the amount of $10,000 from account 0101-120-100-500 contingency to account 0101-106-100-412, parentheses, PT clerical HR to hire temporary assistants.
Thanks, Ann. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, John. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I count 3, John, Peter, and Ann. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. 2 nays. And Chikello and Camille, and abstain.
Yes.
1 abstain. Motion carries 3-2-1.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to a special appropriation up to $9,000. This is for removal and storage of an abandoned vessel on Cheney Beach.
This is something that happened past summer. I think you have a pretty well discussion in there about it too. Basically what happened is there was a boat that was, taking on some water and so forth, so the police towed it out into the bay. It drifted in. They towed it back out, it drifted back in, and beached itself on the second time. The harbor master was made aware of it at that point in time, and he contacted Marker 7 to remove it, which he has the authority to do it, and so they towed it in. And the boat has now been determined to be unsalvageable. It has to be disposed of and so forth like that. And the town is responsible for it right now. Now, the individual who owns the boat, once the bill is paid, we can take action against him. And he keeps occasionally making indications that, yes, I'm still interested, I'll take care of it. But as of right now, we haven't seen that at all. So the bill keeps building up. So this would be a way to get the boat paid for, removed, destroyed, and then we could take action against the individual to reclaim the funds.
So,
Thank you,
just a
Kevin.
question, would you go back after the owner then?
Oh, yes,
For whatever
definitely, the
funds we
town,
have?
yeah, the town, once the bill is paid, we'll take action against the registered owner.
The
Now,
bill,
does that include interest or a lien, or how?
Yes, it would, yeah,
It would
he
be-
has other resources,
Okay.
yes.
That's what I was asking. All right. I have another question. It's up to $9,000. I see that the grand total was $18,972.84. So I'm just confused where the up to 9,000 came from, because if you divide that by 2,
You have that.
it's
I'll-
more than the 9,000.
And it has,
Do you know what I mean? I just couldn't figure out, because it says there's no sales tax, I see that, but.
Well, yeah, so the invoice on the front, they had, it removed the environmental portion, and so the bill is stated at $9,422.61. However, it also includes $562.61, which is taxes. We are exempt from paying taxes. We'll provide them with a certificate 341, and we will pay the $88.60. So it's up to $9,000 in the event that, like, this is the projected cost through the 15th, but just to, in the event that something happened and there was an extra day of storage that we had to pay. So that's why we did it that's why it was done at the up to 9,000.
Okay, because I see the storage fee is $1 per day, and so you did it up through the 15th.
Correct.
Got
So,
it. Okay,
right.
that's what I was getting confused. Thank you.
Any other questions? Peter?
Kevin, you said the bill has to be paid before you can take action?
Yeah,
I
well,
guess I
the-
don't
the-
know
well,
salvage laws that well.
Yeah, it's unsalvageable, the boat.
Uh-huh.
I guess too much water's gotten inside, salt water does not mix well with anything, really.
Right.
It's my understanding we have to, this way it's paid, that we don't keep building up any resources, and then we can take action against them. Because right now, we don't, we're on the hook for the bill, So paying it now will allow us to take legal action against the registered owner. So,
Any other questions? All set?
Well said, Kevin, you answered my question about salvageability. It sounds like this is a no-hoper with this boat, okay?
no, this is a no-hoper, because
Okay.
I know we had a boat, several years ago, we went through this too, when a sailboat washed up on the, on Crescent Beach, and the town had to pay for it, and we were able to recover, I believe, the cost from that incident. And it had to be dismantled as well.
Thanks.
There's no further discussion. I'll call for a vote. I mean, a motion first.
We got the vote.
All right.
Call for a motion.
I'll move to approve a special appropriation of up to $9,000 from account 01-01-120-200-500, parentheses contingency, payable to Marker 7 Marina for removal of a derelict vessel known as, quote, Lex C, Roman numeral 2, and parentheses, from Cheney Beach pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, Title 15.
Thanks, Ann. Chikello, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Peter. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote now. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay? I thought, okay. Motion carries 600. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up on the agenda is a special appropriation for $1,014,000 from the American Rescue Plan funds. There's 4 different items on the American Rescue Plan appropriation request. Before we hear on each particular item, I'd just like to make a few comments about where my head is at this evening with these requests coming before the Board of Finance. I think some time ago it was represented to the Board of Finance that there would be some very small appropriation requests coming forward that were of an immediate need, and that the bulk of the $5.4 million American Rescue Plan funds would be decided when a new administration takes place. So that was after this board had asked several times for an overall strategy of how we were going to handle these appropriation requests that were coming forward for these ARP funds. So no strategy came forward. I feel like we're getting things very piecemeal. We discovered tonight there was a serious error made in that process. I'm not personally comfortable with this process, and so I would ask this board to consider to table this appropriation request until we get some kind of strategy in place and a process in place to ensure that we are properly utilizing these funds going forward. So, how does the board feel?
I agree wholeheartedly with that. I'm very concerned about the pump out boat, and then there's also an article in the paper, not concerning, the town, but with the Board of Ed, with the funds used for ARP funds used for the baseball field, $165,000. So I feel like everything needs to be vetted. I did ask the first selectman on 2 different occasions at meetings, are you going to have a comprehensive plan? And he said, no, I'll be throwing out small amounts, is what he said the last meeting. $920,000 is almost $1 million. And I'm just very concerned. I would like to have a plan in place. I would like to see everything vetted by the attorney. I did receive this compliance and reporting guidance. I mean, this is a pretty dense document. This has to be looked through and actually vetted properly. So I would agree to put aside these appropriations and distribution until a comprehensive plan can be put into place.
And I would just like to follow up by saying, that's not to say that I disagree with any of these requests coming forward. Certainly, all of these carry a lot of merit and they're warranted, and we need to discuss them. The well project certainly, is a critical infrastructure type of project that the ARP is certainly, allowed for that use. But having no sort of umbrella plan, if we continue to appropriate funds on a piecemeal basis, is somebody going to be left out, is my question, because we don't have a strategy for understanding. We don't even know. I understand there's a binder somewhere with all of these appropriation requests, but we haven't even seen the sum total of all those requests. So to ask us to approve this piecemeal just doesn't feel like it's the right process to me. And again, not that all of these projects are worthy. I'm not disputing that. But I think it's time to pause, and I really hope this board considers just tabling this issue for another month or two. Anybody else? Rich?
Anne had heard.
Ann?
about
Oh, okay.
first.
Well,
It's hard for me to.
yeah, I know, I can't hear
We
him
need a
down.
round table.
That's all right. Thanks, Rich. Yeah, so my feeling is that there's been a process, and that process has not only happened, but it's been articulated. Basically, when we received, the legislation was enacted, the ARP legislation in March of 2021. By April, the conversations began, and Mr. Siri can elaborate more, but my understanding is that the Board of Selectmen were intending upon, us hearing comments from organizations, the public, whomever, and making policy decisions on how best to begin to spend the money. As you all may know or not know, the ARP funding is a significant allocation that can take place on the municipal level, on the town level, over a stretch of time. So we have until 2024 to assign, allocate, appropriate. We have till 2026 to actually complete projects. Anything not used has to be returned to the federal government. So to me, the concept of ARP funding, since it is COVID based, was, and I believe this is articulated in the statute as well, and in the regulations and in the interim regulations Treasury has promulgated, is to spread it out a little bit. So we have things happening at the time of COVID. So from about March 3rd, 21, you can go back to that point in time, deal with things. You can go forward as your town, and in the case of boards of education, as things become more apparent. Not every effect of COVID is going to be apparent right away. I think we've already seen that with respect to schools, school children. We've seen mental health issues, people not tending to themselves, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I feel for me it was quite clear that the process was established early on by Board of Selectmen, and I was quite impressed. We were in the midst of our own budget cycle, so we had our own budget meetings going on, but I was impressed by the number of meetings, again, Mr. Siri can perhaps illuminate here, that the Board of Selectmen had, special meetings, conferences, and their objective, and I think that was well articulated, was to triage, prioritize, deal with food insecurity, deal with mental health, physical health, deal with our organizations like Niantic Main Street, who had lost, the opportunity to fundraise, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't feel as though somehow there wasn't a process or a process wasn't followed. And we can, obviously if additional documentation would like to be viewed, I am sure the Board of Selectmen can share that with us. But I feel as though that message was very clear. And if you look at what has been approved, I think you can see that immediate needs, there might have been like a three-pronged, 3 categories: immediate needs, intermediate, long range.
And remember in here, we also had the overlay, and I referenced this at the beginning of my remarks. We had the overlay of the Treasury Department issuing those interim rules. And I believe that happened in May. So, so from that stretch, you know, we've had additional information on how to spend, and we're still digesting that information. But I don't feel as though there's anything here, you know, that somehow, again, wasn't part of a process or a prioritization process, or the public didn't have input. I think that was very clear. We may have been mired in our own budget process at the time and not paying attention to what was happening, you know, as much attention as we could have. But, and as far as the issue of, you know, our pump out boat goes and potential issue there, you know, I'm more than happy to have our council re-examine that. We've had lots of advice from council. We've had 2 memoranda of opinion. We've had opinion on how the process should go from Board of Selectmen, Finance, and then town meeting. So we've had lots of input. So that's where I'm at.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks. Sure.
Rich, did you have some comments to make, please?
Yes. For me, I feel as though I've looked at reports in the newspaper of other towns, and the detail of an overarching strategy of how to spend the funds and the prioritizations that were given. To me, it feels as though we really have gone more piecemeal with this. And I understand that things come up, and as Anne has just mentioned, that you don't see it all at one point in time, that, you know, some things bubble up as you go along. And, you know, my heart tears because everything that has been brought forth is something that I can support. But my concern is, let's say that we have, you know, a few more of these $1 million items. And are we going to whittle away the funds that we have by taking care of things that may not have as large of an impact on the community? Anne mentioned about the public input. I'm not quite so sure how much the public has input into this. And during the time of COVID, it's hard to have public meetings. We had a lot of Zoom things. We had things online. A lot of people don't even know about meetings that occur. And so I just, as our first selectman had mentioned, that he would turn the strategy over to the next administration, and that there'd be a few items that would come up. Well, we've got a list of probably at least a dozen here and another 4 tonight. For me, even though I can see the validity of the things that are on tonight's docket, I still feel maybe take a pause and let's see where an overarching strategy might come in that can prioritize and also be related to the POCD. That was a request that I had early, was that things could be related to the POCD to help our community. I'm done.
Thank you, Rich. Would anybody else like to weigh in? Yes, John.
Okay. If you remember back in time, when the federal government told us we were going to get a substantial amount of money, it was very vague at the time what we could use that money for. But as we, move forward, we found out that certain items could be used from the American Rescue Plan. To me, these 4 items here, especially the water and sewer, are well within the American Rescue Plan funds approval. And the other 3, is, from what I've read, are also. in that rescue plan approval process. Now, as far as the boat, the pump-out boat, we may find out down the road after the two attorneys, one from East Lyme and one from Waterford, that the American Rescue Plans are able to pay for that pump-out boat. There's nothing right now, we think maybe not. But, you know, that being put aside, I think the appropriation for the $1 million plus, or the $920,000 for the water and sewer, well 5, should be approved, because I think that goes along with what the American Rescue Plans will pay for. And as far as being piecemeal, we may find out, like I said, as time goes on, that other things will be able to be paid for by the American Rescue Plan funds. But to do it piecemeal, we're going to come to a point where instead of having 4 items in front of us, we could have a dozen or 2 items in front of us to approve. So I think to look at everything down the road in one big package is going to be a problem. I think as items come up that are requested from the town, like these 4 items here, I think we should move ahead and approve them, because they are well needed and well deserved, especially, you know, from the comments from Mr. Mingo and Mr. Cunningham. I think it's very important that we get this 5th well, or well 5, excuse me. So we can get, it's only pumping at 25% now, we need it up to 100%, or as close as possible. So I just feel that we have to approve these items tonight. And I don't think there's going to be a problem of being turned down by the federal government under the umbrella of the American Rescue Plan funds for these items. I think we just have to move ahead and vote on them and approve them.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that's how you feel. I guess I'm just looking for a little bit more of a definitive solution, and perhaps I wasn't clear in the beginning of the meeting. I spent 30 minutes on the phone today with Kate Brown, who is the CVA program coordinator. Okay, so she does this for a living, and she was able to provide enough documentation to me and pointed out very specifically that you cannot match federal funds with other federal funds. And she was pretty clear that what we did was inappropriate. So that is all I have to move forward on today. Now, you know, if you would like to spend a couple of more hundred more dollars asking our town attorney to review that again, well, I wouldn't be in favor of spending that money, because I think that we have a pretty good solution to tap into contingency funds to cover that. So, you know, I'm just trying to protect taxpayer dollars there.
Okay, let me make one comment. What was the name of the lady you talked to?
Kate Brown.
Now, was she talking about the pump-out boat
Yes.
specifically?
Yes.
Not these 4 items?
Oh, it has nothing to do with these 4 items, John. Okay. It's specifically the pump-out boat.
Well, that's my point. I mean, if it has nothing to do with these 4 items, you're just concerned about the pump-out boats.
I'm concerned about the process and not having a clear understanding of what the process has been. We have been caught in a situation before where a good process has not been in place, and we've been caught unaware, and I'm just trying to avoid further problems down the road by taking a pause. That's all I'm asking. I'm not disputing the validity of these appropriation requests. I'm saying let's pause, let's get a proper process in place. You know, Rich mentioned we haven't had any input from the town. These are not our dollars, these are taxpayer dollars, and I just don't feel comfortable with the approach that we're taking to spend taxpayer dollars. And that is our primary responsibility on this board, is fiscal prudence and responsibility, and to advocate for the taxpayer to make sure that we're using those tax dollars wisely. And I'm just not convinced we are. So we can agree to disagree, but what I would like to do tonight is to, rather than have all of these appropriation requests come up to the days one at a time and spend another hour, if I'm thinking that it might not be approved, all I'm asking is, well, let's take a pause and table it until the next meeting. So, did you have anything to add, Peter?
Yeah, I'm listening very carefully, and I do support everything that's on here, especially the water and sewer thing. I think that's critical to the town. I do think that that's important, and it sounds like it falls very neatly under that. I certainly support the other ones. I wish we could give more money to care and share. I think they're particularly valuable at this time. That being said, I think that having an overall plan, and I'm not clear on what the overall plan is for the town, and that may be because I haven't been paying attention, but the fact is that I'm not aware of an overall plan for the total amount of money over the next 4 or 5 years. Your comment about being faced with a dozen of these requests, I would actually prefer that. I would like to see everybody throw their wish list out for $18 million and then having the opportunity to kind of help prioritize. I'm sure that the well will come out on top with that, you know. And if I have anything to say, Care and Share would come out high as well. But I agree with the strategy of having kind of a plan to move forward so that when we're making decisions, we're making them in the context of an overall plan. I think that spending that kind of money, given this unique opportunity that we have, I think having an overarching plan gives us a chance to make each decision based on an overall goal of what we're trying to do. And I've always have worked in that kind of a mindset. I don't want to come across as being against the water and sewer, the well number 5. I think that that's critical. I think all these things are critical. And I fully support them, but I do agree that having a plan to work in. So as we're going through different administrations, different committee structures, this committee will restructure and a couple of times during this, as will the Board of Selectmen. Having an overall plan to work from, I think, makes a lot of sense, and I support that.
If I could say, Peter, I see your point. However, I'll go back to my original point that the process can change if we have a different administration, which we will have no matter what, in terms of first selectmen and so forth, and new folks on different boards. You can amend your process. You can decide to have a broader spectrum of or inter-commission organization that decides these issues. But I just have a question for Mr. Siri, if I could. I've made the point about the process that's happened so far, and could you elaborate? Could you tell us your process, your prioritization? Because somehow I think that, I don't know, maybe because I went to the Board of Selectmen meetings and the Board of Finance meetings, but so maybe I'm in a different mindset, but could you elaborate on what has happened?
And Kevin, specifically, I'd be interested in understanding, did you form a subcommittee with people outside of the Board of Selectmen in order to tackle this, or did you just come together as 6 Board of Selectmen and make the decisions up here while the meeting was happening? So if you could explain that process, I think that's a great idea, Ann. Thank you.
Okay, it wasn't done as far as reaching out to other, or forming a subcommittee or anything like that. In most of these here, we knew the Wi-Fi improvements, the virtual meeting packages, the microwave, the security. Those are already things very affordable, not affordable, but covered by this, so we figured get those done as quickly as possible because it's a safety aspect as well. The clinical therapists, the wellness prevention, those are things that we felt that there was an immediate need for. We did reach out. I reached out to the veterans and to the American Legion because they supported veterans during COVID and weren't able to take in any revenue. We were able to articulate what they went through as far as losses. Same thing with the the Shoreline Kitchen. Ledgelight Health District had made that request to us for the money had they done for everyone else. Same thing with the Southeast Connecticut Council of Government, and obviously some money there for the New London Homeless Hospital, because we have that list here. But no, there was never a sit-down to come up with a prioritization or anything like that. The feeling was we were just going to address the immediate needs until after the upcoming election and a new administration took place. I think these are the last three things, because these, especially the water and sewer and care and share and Niantic Main Street, were viewed as somewhat critical as of right now. We've had a lot of information that the well 5 is working. It's supposed to come up with over 700 gallons a minute. It's not even coming up with 200 gallons a minute now. And we had a lot of information regarding the fact that if there was a problem with a spillage or something like that on 95, it could affect well 1A and 6. So this is the prime well that feeds the town. It's about 1/3 of the supply, so the quickest we could have this back up and operating at capacity, we felt that was an urgent need, to help out the town. And it's not a difficult task. We have basically everything in place to do that, so we're still hoping that you would consider that as something that would be of an urgent nature. Main Street is become, we're the 6th best Main Street in Connecticut. And they were wrong, we're the first best Main Street in Connecticut. Anything that organization has done has benefited the town, so they're just looking right now to get started on going to a higher level, so I'm hoping that could be supported. Care and share, you have some supporting documentation in your folders tonight. I met with Pat today. They have a brand new freezer that was bought for them by Rotary and the Lions Club. They want to get another exact one like that, because the 2 old ones that were secondhand ones that are breaking down on a regular basis, and they're getting to the point of the year where they're going to have to store a lot of frozen foods with the holidays coming up. East Lyme Town Clerk, she only asked for Karen only asked for $7,800 just to do as much as she could about a month ago, and then between your board and our board, we asked to come up with a bigger figure. She came up with $99,000 to go way back, and then we said, let's go back to that. So I can understand maybe that you saying, let's take a pause on, but the other 3, I feel are more priority right now that need to be done. And yes, there probably should have been more direction coming from the office in there saying, this is what the plan is. But I know we have no more appropriations planned at anything between now and the change of administration, so.
Yeah, Kevin, I appreciate that you're speaking to the validity of the things that have, the appropriation requests that have come before us. But again, we are not disputing the validity of the request. What we are asking for you to do is to explain the process that actually occurred to get us to this point and how that will change going forward.
I think the thing going forward,
Well, first explain the process.
The process was, well, here again, I said we reached out to organizations that we felt were most in need, which is what we did right here with the...
Was there any kind of public announcement that the funds were available, that you were soliciting requests?
Well, a little bit, because the Veterans Council did come into us, so we did make people aware of the fact, but as I said, there was no subcommittee formed or anything like that. The feeling was we would just take urgent requests at this point in time. Because there's we as, I don't know, John or somebody pointed out, we have till the end of 2024 to obligate these funds at the end of 2026 to spend them. So my personal preference would be to sit down with all the department heads, get their intake on that, and then reach out to the seniors and stuff like that to see if they can also, that'd be the network to reach out in their community to see where help might be needed. But that did not happen.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments or?
Can we make a motion to table? Or does it just get tabled?
How
How does that work?
This I need advice from our recording secretary. Do we make a motion to table it, or can we just choose not to?
No, you have to make a motion to
Yeah,
table it.
Okay.
It's been passed to you and voted on
Right,
previously,
okay.
so you do have to act on it
Okay.
somehow.
That would be, I mean, I just think that that's going to save based on what I'm hearing from all 6 board members, I'm thinking that to move forward with this would add another hour or 2 to the meeting, and if at the end of the night, we're going to come to the same conclusion, I'm not sure that that's time well spent. So if somebody would like to make a motion to table this issue to a future meeting, I'm willing to entertain
I
that.
can make a motion and we can take a vote and see how it falls.
Sounds good.
I'll make a motion to table the special appropriation in the amount of $1,014,000 in the American Rescue Plan funds that are set forth in the agenda dated October 13th, 2021.
Thank you, Ann Shakilla. Was there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Rich. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of tabling this agenda item, please do so by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. To be continued. With that, we'll move on to ratify department transfers in the amount of $138,794.80 for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021.
Should have been out of the agenda. Once it's done.
Should I make a motion?
Anna, would you,
Somebody has to speak to it.
Anna, yeah. We're on ratify department transfers?
That's what I was gonna say, I should make a motion. Okay, I'll make a motion to ratify departmental transfers in the amount of $138,794.80 processed for fiscal year end June 30th, 2021.
Thanks, Ann Shakella. Was there a second?
Second.
Thanks, John Birmingham. Any further discussion? Any questions at all? This is pretty much a routine event. It happens at the end of every fiscal year, trying to rebalance the dollars into the appropriate departments. There's no further discussion. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I just have a question. I'm just, TR, does that just mean transfer?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I just kept going, is it some new kind of overtime I don't know? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. If there's no further discussion or questions, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thanks. Motion carries 6-0. With that, is there any old business that the finance director or the deputy first selectman or any board of finance member would like to discuss? You're all set?
Is there anything, Anna, on the audit and what you're doing with that, by any chance? Any new information?
Yeah, so at this point, the auditors have come in and they've spent a couple of weeks doing preliminary work, and they will be back the second week of November to complete their field work.
Okay, that's great.
Anything else from the board members?
I have like a question.